The memory does not arrive as a single picture. It comes in fragments: a pale winter sky over Michigan, the quiet surface of a lake that looks almost kind, and the name of a young woman spoken in a station hallway with a softness that does not match the weight of what has happened. Hana Mirelli, 21, literature student, beloved daughter. The words hover in the air, never quite settling. No one can say, even now, if she moved toward that lake alone, guided by some hidden ache, or if another presence walked at her side in the dark. For Jonah Kade, then a new face in an old department, the memory is made of small details that do not fit neatly anywhere. The laces of his shoes damp from snowmelt, the smell of old coffee, the way someone placed a folded blanket over the back of a chair as if Hana might walk in, sit down and wrap herself in it. He had not known her, yet her absence felt strangely familiar, the way an echo can sound like a voice you half remember. He remembers the quiet more than anything else, not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of people stepping carefully around an unseen line. Conversations would start with Hana's name and fall off into unfinished phrases. She was always so. So what? Jonah had asked once almost gently. The answer never arrived. Just a small shrug, a glance toward the floor, a breath held slightly too long. They said Hana's hair had been still damp when they found her, as if the lake had tried to keep her and then changed its mind. They said she loved poetry, that she scribbled lines on receipts and napkins and the margins of library books. They said she laughed more with other people's sadness than with their joy, as if she understood something about sorrow that made it less heavy for those around her. They did not say, at least not to Jonah, whether they believed she had chosen that night for herself, or whether someone else had chosen it for her. The report from that year lay in the files Jonah now knows too well, a series of observations, times, names, statements that sound careful but incomplete. The language is neutral, almost kindly distant, found near the shoreline. Signs of prior distress, unclear origin. No definitive conclusion. Words stacked together like boxes, each one labeled and sealed, each one hiding more than it reveals. He can still recall the way the lake looked when he drove by a few days after, long after the first attention had faded and life was quietly reassembling itself. The water was smooth, and the houses along the shore stood like listeners holding their breath. If he slowed the car and rolled down the window, the air felt thin, as if the whole place remained unsettled, waiting for someone to decide what had truly happened there. Sometimes late at night, when the office had emptied and the hum of machines was the only sound, Jonah would open the folder again. Not because he had been assigned to it, he had not, but because there was something unfinished in the way Hana's story ended. A girl with notebooks full of words, and yet the most important line in her life had been left blank. He would skim the statements, tracing each sentence with his eyes as if he might suddenly find a hidden message in the spaces between. Friends describing her as thoughtful, private, deeply attentive to others. A neighbor recalling the light under her window at odd hours. A professor nodding her talent for listening. No one spoke of clear despair, but no one could promise she had been free of it either. Her life had been held in a balance that no one had noticed until it tipped. The uncertainty sat inside Jonah like a small stone. Was she overwhelmed in some way no one had seen, gently pulled toward the water by an inward tide? Or had another person stood too close, hand on her arm, voice in her ear, guiding her toward a choice that was not hers at all? When he thought of her, he did not picture the lake or the official photographs. He imagined her in the campus library or leaning against a kitchen counter, talking with someone she trusted. He imagined her smiling with that slight edge people have when they are trying to hide a deeper thought. He imagined the moment when that thought, whatever it was, became too heavy to carry alone. It never left him, though years passed and other names came and went across his desk. The Hana Mirelli folder moved from an active shelf to a deeper drawer, then to a gray metal cabinet along the back wall. Time, people say, softens everything. For Jonah, it only covered it in layers of quiet dust. He wondered, sometimes, who grieved Hana in ways that could not be spoken. Her mother, perhaps, setting an extra place without realizing. A friend who stopped walking near the lake after dusk. Someone who had said something sharp in the days before her final night and now replayed that moment over and over, unsure whether it had mattered or not. The worst part, he thought, was not knowing. Not whether a law had been broken, but whether a soul had been gently pushed or simply lost its way. And so the memory stayed with him, not as a scene of dramatic action, but as a soft, unsettled ache. A winter sky, a quiet lake, a young woman's name spoken in the hallway as if it might still call her back. What no one expected was that, many years later, this unsteady absence would move again. Not with sudden noise, but with the subtle shift of something long ignored, turning slightly in the dark. 2. A forgotten witness or document reopens the cold investigation. The rediscovery begins not with a dramatic announcement, but with a small administrative project, the kind no one marks on a calendar. Old files being scanned into a new system. Boxes opened for the first time in years. A young clerk with headphones on, humming softly as she feeds reports into a machine that blinks and whirs, converting paper into rows of digital entries. Hana Mirelli's folder is one of many. The label, written in faded ink, is a little smudged at the edges. The clerk does not know the story behind it. She only notices that the folder seems thicker than most, as if someone had tried to close over pages that did not quite fit. When she opens it, a single sheet slips out and lands on the floor face down. She almost ignores it, just another extra page in a week full of them, but something in her neat habit of mind insists she pick it up. On the top, in uneven handwriting, are 3 words. Supplemental statement enclosed. Except it is not enclosed. It is there in her hand, the paper yellowed at the edges, hole punched but never fully clipped into the folder. The date at the top reads, December 20, 2002, the day after Hana's passing. The signature at the bottom belongs to someone the clerk does not recognize, Evan Kell. A name with no ring of familiarity, no notation beside it. In the space for relation to individual, the word neighbor is scribbled, then overwritten with friend. The clerk pauses, eyes drifting over the page. The sentences do not describe what one might expect. No detailed account of a night by the lake, no clear naming of another person. Instead, they circle around something even more unsettling: hesitation. I saw Hana walking past my window around 9, the statement begins. She looked thoughtful but calm. She waved when she saw me watching. I almost went outside to talk with her. I almost asked if she wanted company. I did not. Further down, I heard a car door close shortly after she passed my house. I do not know if it was hers. I did not look. I should have looked. And then, near the end, a line that feels like a quiet confession. She once told me that when she got overwhelmed, she would go to the lake to feel small in a good way. I do not know if that is what happened tonight. I cannot say she was alone. There is no record that this page was ever fully added to the original report. No notes in the margin. No follow-up interview. It is a voice that spoke once, softly, and then vanished inside a folder no one opened again. The clerk hesitates. She could simply scan it with everything else, allow it to slip into a digital archive where it will remain one line among thousands. But something in the phrasing catches her. I almost went outside. I almost asked. The sentences carry a weight that feels different from the dry language of the other documents. She brings the page to her supervisor, who skims it with polite attention, then frowns slightly. "This should have been in the original file," he says. "Maybe it was misfiled. Better flag it, just in case." "In case of what?" she asks, more curious than anxious. "In case someone cares enough to look back," he answers, already turning to another stack of work. Later that afternoon, an automatic notification appears on Jonah's computer, part of a routine update on old cases being digitized. A small icon flashes beside Hana's name, "New document added." For a moment he thinks it must be an error. There is nothing new about a winter night from more than 20 years ago. Still, his hand moves to the mouse almost on its own. He clicks, and the scanned image fills his screen. As he reads, the office around him seems to recede. The hum of the heater, the distant ring of phones, the faint clatter of keyboards all drift into a softer background. There is only the voice on the page, a neighbor, a friend, someone whose hesitation has been preserved in ink. "I almost went outside. I almost asked if she wanted company." Jonah leans back in his chair and closes his eyes for a moment. There is something painfully familiar in these lines. The way the writer circles around a small choice that suddenly feels enormous. The way an ordinary evening, a moment of indecision, can begin to glow with a strange, unbearable light when viewed from years away. He scrolls down to the end, to the sentence that will not leave him. "I cannot say she was alone." It is not a revelation in the traditional sense. It does not name a person or provide a clear sequence of events. Yet it shifts something essential. The official report he remembers so well leans heavily on the image of Hana alone at the lake, lost in thoughts no one could fully trace. This page, overlooked until now, opens the possibility that another presence shared that night, and that someone somewhere has lived with silent knowledge of it. The question that rises in Jonah is not who, but why still silent? What does it mean to carry a piece of this story for so long and never speak it fully? The system logs record that the original statement came in but was never properly processed. It seems small, almost understandable. A busy office before a holiday, a page misaligned, a clerk overwhelmed. Yet to Jonah, it feels like something more intimate. The way human lives can be altered by quiet neglect simply because no one wants to lean into discomfort for too long. The rediscovery sparks a formal response, of course. A short memo is drafted, a meeting is scheduled, folders are retrieved from storage. But what really reopens the cold space around Hana's name is not procedure. It is Jonah sitting alone at his desk, hand over his mouth, wondering how many times in his life he has almost asked a question and then decided, gently, not to. He finds himself thinking of Evan Kell. Where is he now? Does he still live near that lake, passing the shoreline on his way to work or to the store, remembering a wave he did not answer? Does he replay that night in quiet moments, listening again to a car door he did not investigate, to footsteps he did not follow? The reopening of the case does not arrive with sirens or breaking news. It begins with a single person, reading a page that should have been read 2 decades earlier and feeling something in his chest respond. Not excitement, not professional satisfaction, but a careful, heavy sympathy for Hana, for Evan, for everyone who stands at the edge of another person's sorrow and does not know whether to step closer. Jonah places the printed page into the physical folder, sliding it under the original report. The paper fits exactly, as if it had always been meant to rest there. The folder now feels different in his hand, slightly heavier, though he knows that is only his own awareness. He does not tell anyone yet what he feels. The formal conversation will happen, policy will be consulted, steps will be discussed. For now, he closes his office door and sits with the rediscovered voice of a neighbor who almost did something and then did not. The investigation is reopened officially because a document was misplaced and then found. Unofficially, it is reopened because one man cannot shake the feeling that the real unanswered question is not what happened at the lake, but what it means to live with the knowledge of what we did not do. 3. Investigator focuses on human psychology more than physical clues. By the time the reopened case reaches the conference room, it has already been shaped into familiar forms. Timelines, lists of names, maps of the area around the lake. Screens light up with dates and arrows. Someone speaks about possible routes. Another mentions the weather conditions that night. The air feels tidy, brisk, efficient. Jonah listens, but his attention drifts again and again toward the spaces between what is said. We'll need to see if there are any remaining items from her residence, someone suggests. We should compare prior notes, re-interview anyone still local, another adds. All true, all necessary. Yet what Jonah feels pressing on him is quieter. The need to understand how Hana moved through the world, not just through a particular night. When the meeting ends, responsibilities assigned, he collects the folder and steps out into the corridor. The building smells faintly of paper and cleaning solution. Sunlight falls through the tall windows in narrow shapes, dividing the floor into lines of brightness and shadow. He stands in one of the shadowed strips, feeling more at home there. Hana's photograph is clipped to the inside of the folder. It is not an official identification image, but a casual one from a school event. She is seated on a folding chair, turning slightly away from the camera, as if the photographer has called her name at the last moment. Her smile is present but tentative, the kind that leaves room for retreat. Jonah studies her expression, not for signs of distress. Those are rarely visible in such moments, but for the way she holds herself. The slight tilt of her shoulders, the way her hands rest in her lap, fingers loosely intertwined. She seems both present and slightly removed, as though her attention is divided between the room she is in and some inner space only she can see. He spends the next few days not at the lake, not in evidence rooms, but in places where Hana once existed in small, ordinary ways. At the old campus library, now partly renovated, he stands near the shelves where literature majors still wander, choosing words to carry home. He speaks with a librarian who remembers Hana vaguely, always calm, always had a notebook, and with a younger staff member who has only heard her mentioned in passing. He runs his fingers lightly along the spines of books she might have touched. It is not the physical contact that matters, of course. It is the attempt to feel something of her rhythm. What did she seek when she came here? Comfort, answers, momentary escape. Later, he visits the apartment building where she rented a small unit. The current resident, a nurse with gentle eyes, invites him in with a cautious but open kindness. The rooms are arranged differently now, painted in new colors, yet some elements are unchanged. The narrow hallway, the window overlooking the street, the kitchen counter that catches afternoon light. "Did you know her?" he asks, aware that 2 decades is a long time for such continuity. "I moved here years later," she replies, "but sometimes I think about her. People still mention her name, as if the air remembers." There is a pause. The nurse looks toward the window, then back at him. "Is there something you're trying to find?" she asks softly. "Maybe not find," Jonah says, "understand." The words feel fragile as they leave his mouth. He is not here to discover a decisive clue, a hidden item, a forgotten object. He is here to listen for the emotional pattern of Hana's life, what weighed on her, what sustained her, where the fault lines in her relationships might have been. He tracks down former classmates, now scattered across different towns and occupations. Their recollections vary in detail but share a common texture. Hana as a listener, a keeper of other people's worries, a presence that could hold sadness without judgment. She had this way of making silence feel warm, one friend says, sitting across from Jonah in a cafe where the music plays just loud enough to soften their conversation for others. You could sit with her and not say anything for a long time, and it wouldn't feel strange. Did she share much about herself? Jonah asks. The friend hesitates. Her fingers trace the rim of her cup. Not really, she admits. She would hint at things, say she was tired or that her mind felt crowded, but if you tried to ask more, she would change the subject. Gently, skillfully, you'd hardly notice until later. Did anyone push? Jonah asks. Another pause. The friend looks toward the window, where people pass by in winter coats, their faces partially hidden by scarves and hats. I think we all wanted her to stay the way she was for us, she says finally. Strong, calm, understanding. Maybe pushing her would have meant admitting she had limits, that she needed as much as we did. He writes that down